All right, get this started. So, my name is Sam Altenberger. I'm here today to talk a little bit about wireless emergency alerts and how they are developing and evolving, and best practices for sending wireless emergency alerts. This is based on a lecture that I saw while I was in Savannah, Georgia at the International Association of Emergency Managers Conference, presented by Jeanette Sutton and Erica Kulagowski. And I added a bit more about various history and other aspects, made it a little more specific to Alaska. Before we get started here, some safety information. Exit signs are clearly marked in this building, as are the restrooms down the hall. Refreshments are available down in the hallway. And if we have to evacuate, our meeting spot is out by the main gate where you came in. So, a little bit of history of the emergency alert system. This is a national system that the United States uses to inform anybody in a community when there is an emergency or urgent condition where action needs to be taken. Before 1951, there was no systematic way of doing this. It was mostly, whoever the broadcaster was on the radio would get on the radio and say whatever the alert is, but it wasn't coming necessarily from government sources. Then the Cold War happened, and in 1951, the US government created the program called CONELRAD, which is Control of Electromagnetic Radiation. And essentially what that is designation of certain radio signals, in this case 640 and 1240 AM, that you would turn to receive emergency information if there was an event. On old school radios, like on this vehicle, you can actually see right here that they had these little civil defense triangles, and those indicated on the radio where those stations were that you could turn to in an emergency. 1963, with the development of television, we had, and television came a little earlier, but this is when it actually, EBS evolved. So the emergency broadcast system replaced CONELRAD and was really the basis of the emergency alert system in its modern form that we have today. Essentially what this is an interlink in broadcasters, so the government could push a button and directly override the signal coming from a broadcaster. And then in 1997, the terminology and technology changed a little bit to create the Emergency Alert System, which is the program run by FEMA. It's actually a joint effort between FEMA, the Federal Communications Commission, and NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. And that's what we have today. Now, my question for you is, how often do you have live TV on or listen to radio over the air?
Well, I'm driving.
Only when you're driving?
Wait,
Yeah.
TV?
Radio.
Oh.
Anyone
I
else?
have TV at my house.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So today, with the internet, right, we have all this streaming, or we use Spotify, or, over the air, we really don't use it much. And so the emergency alert system in its legacy state is really on a technology that isn't accessible to many people these days. So a few years back, the government developed a new system, which is wireless emergency alerts. And what this is a system where, regardless of your carrier, as long as you have a compatible handset, cellular phone, which basically all of them are today, you can get instant alerts directly to your phone. And they have some really cool advantages over just, say, like a regular text message that you might receive from your carrier. So they're very much like a text message in that they create concise text-based messages that go directly to your phone. And there's 3 levels. You have presidential alerts, which are issued by the federal government, and really from the president has to authorize that. They have imminent threat alerts, which can be from any jurisdictional level, all the way down to local. And then you have amber alerts, which are for abducted children alerts. You can disable, you can opt out of the latter 2, but you can't opt out of the presidential alerts. And it's cool because it is an opt-out versus opt-in system, which I'll talk about a little bit later. They get your attention with unique sound and vibration. Raise your hand, who here has ever gotten one of these alerts? Okay, so it might have been a little surprising when you got it the first time and you didn't really know what it was, but it makes a big loud beeping noise, and it vibrates your phone. And then it's sent to targeted cell towers. So rather than sending it to individual subscribers, basically emergency management agencies can select a polygon on a map that's the affected area, and they can push send, and every cell tower in that area will send out the message to all customers, all phones that are connected to those cell towers. So you get full coverage. And it does so without interrupting any existing text, call, or data action in process, or slowing anything down. Now, the bummer is, right now, WEA is limited at 90 characters. And we'll go a bit into how you do messages later, but 90 characters isn't that much. A regular text message is limited at 160 characters, and it's a short messaging service, SMS. However, they are upgrading this system, which is awesome. They're increasing it to 360 characters soon, and we'll have the ability to have URL links, maps, and more refined geo-targeting to more specifically target customers. So if you have one of these alerts, right, we need to be able to deliver timely and actionable messages. Those are the two main cases. I'm sure you've seen cases in the past where alerts either don't come in on time, so they're kind of useless, or they don't tell you what to do. And so it really creates more confusion than help. With our changing channels towards cellular phones, we now have shorter messages, faster delivery, and greater determination on where that's going to be broadcast to. So the main consideration that we need to think about with these messages is how do we increase behavioral intent? How do we make people take action? Because it's one thing to just send a message out, it's another thing to actually get people to act on that message. So when we look at a communication model, and there's tons of these communication models out there, but for WEA specifically, for emergency alerts, we have the warning created by your local emergency management or public safety agency. The warning is then sent out to the affected area. It's received by the user, and then you generate a behavioral response with the user, right? Your intended action. What I'm really going to focus in on here is this link right here between when they receive that alert and getting them to actually create action. How do we make alerts that actually prompt and generate action? So, So some background on this. The data from here that I'm using here is from the researchers that I was talking about in the beginning, and it's all outlined in a paper they released. But essentially what they did is they had a systematic review of literature, they developed draft guidance, and then they worked with various agencies and experts to create this final review of best practices. So when we look at social behavioral response to warnings, you have the time from the message received, and then what you have to do is generate with the receiver a change in perspective, a change from a perception of safety to a perception of risk, right? Everything we do is a hazard analysis, a risk analysis, right? And so what we're doing here is helping users create their own risk analysis to generate action, because you're not going to have a behavioral response without a perception of risk. So what we see when we do this is that you have a bunch of important pieces, right? The content, what's actually in the message, the style, how that message is conveyed. Both of those change the perspective. They affect how people are receiving this. And then that in place will affect what level of confirmation they seek, right? In emergency alerting, there's a term called milling that we use. And milling is when you receive an alert and you basically seek to validate that alert. So you get an alert, it says there's a tsunami. And then you go, you maybe open up Twitter, open up Facebook, look at the news. Are my friends evacuating? What does the news say? What's the local officials say? Does this actually affect me? Do I actually need to take action? So when we see these, that's all wasted time right there, right? If it's an event where you need to generate action now, this milling time can be detrimental. And this is especially the case, say it's an active shooter event at the university, right? If the alert goes off, we want people to take action now, right? That could actually save their life versus them looking around, is what's everyone else doing, you know? if the fire alarm, granted we don't have a fire alarm in here, but if the fire alarm went off right now and say we're in a more crowded room, what do you think the main reaction is going to be? Is everyone going to get up and walk out, or what do you think?
Immediate. It'll be an immediate response.
Yeah, that's possible. But if it's, and granted, this is a fire service audience, but say if we're in a general community, there's probably going to be a few seconds of people looking around, seeing, oh, is anyone else getting up, or and so that's that milling time that we want to reduce. So in order to do that, we want to have very clear and defined message elements, and we want to convey them in a good order. So the 5 elements you have, and I wrote them up on the board here, is your message source. Who's sending the message, right? That's really important for the person that's receiving the message to know. It creates credibility so that they actually listen to you and follow the directions. You want to describe the hazard, both the description of the event and, very importantly, the consequences of this event if they don't follow instructions, right? So what's happening, and then what's the risk? What's the likelihood and potential consequences of this? You want to include the populations and geography at the risk. This is critical for reducing that milling, right? You want to say who and where is going to be affected. Leave out, you're giving them this information so that they don't have to wonder, will this actually affect me? Do I need to do anything, or is it just for other people? Human nature is that people automatically assume that events affect other people and not themselves. Time, you want to show the time to take action and when this message expires, or when you will send out an update to create, to share further instructions. And then you want to give guidance. Tell them exactly what they need to do. You want to, and then explain why, right? So you want to tell them what they need to do and why those actions are taken to reduce those consequences. This affects the comprehension. So with content, it affects comprehension. And to be accessible and increase comprehension, you want to avoid things like acronyms, right? Unless you're really savvy and maybe you're in public safety, you might not know what DHS, CDC, DPS is. You might, the general person, they might not even know what AKST means when you're referring to time, right? You want to clearly identify the threat. You want to provide specific information about populations at risk and the location. So you don't want to include broad areas, because that makes people think it won't apply to them. If you say Fairbanks is at risk, well, they might think, oh, I'm out in North Pole or out in the hills, right? So that doesn't really affect me, right? Maybe it does affect them, though. So you want to be specific. You want to say it's that active shooter example. You want to say, to the specificity, like which building or which part of campus this is in. And then if possible, include a map. It's really helpful to have a visual item to increase that comprehension. Message content also affects believability. So whether someone will actually believe you and take action. So source is really important on that. You want to use threats sparingly so you don't have alert fatigue, right? If you send out messages all the time for every little thing, you're going to have a boy cried wolf, situation going on, and people aren't going to react. And then you want to make sure that the messages reflect the seriousness and the time. They also affect personalization. So, you can indicate seriousness by using action words like imminent danger, urgent, critical, now, things like that spark basically urgency. Action words, go, run, take cover, and then using unambiguous words. So terms like shelter in place can be taken a bunch of different ways for people who maybe haven't gotten specific organizational training for that. They might not know what shelter in place means. So you really need to kind of dumb it down, be specific, say, close all doors and windows, hide, things like that. And then using landmarks is helpful, if possible, because people who maybe are not locals might know a landmark more than they know, say, road names or other more localized information. And then this affects that deciding time, that milling. So you want to be clear, specific, certain, and then complete, unambiguous, and give specific, actionable instruction to reduce that time. And I apologize for the weird stuff, and I don't know what's going on with that. Um, So one thing I also want to include in here, which is kind of interesting, is that you have the difference between those wireless emergency alerts, and then you have opt-in messaging, which is a whole nother way that you can send alerts. Here in Fairbanks, we have two main systems that I know about. We have Everbridge Nixle, which is a program used by state troopers and Fairbanks police to share information. And then you have a Rave system, which is used by the university. And then I'm sure there's others throughout, for various smaller communities in the area. The thing about this, though, is they're opt-in. I was saying earlier, WEA is awesome because it goes out to everyone. Every phone that's compatible in those cell tower areas get the alert. With these, you have to opt in, and sometimes that opt-in process is more difficult than it needs to be. So it has lower, more selective membership. Who do you think opts into receiving alerts through these opt-in systems?
Firefighters, EMS, and cops.
Exactly, the people that already are in the loop and really the alert doesn't need to go to as critically. And then when you fill it out, this is the form for Nixle, right? You have to fill out 3 required fields plus a bunch of other stuff if you actually want to get the alerts on your phone. However, it has some advantages, right? You can provide lower intensity alerts through this. WEA, like I said, you really only want to send it out if it's an imminent major thing. With this, because it's opt-in, you can send out maybe lower level type alerts. But that in itself can also create alert fatigue if you use it too much. And then these go out over SMS, which is limited to 160 per message. Here are some poor examples, I think, of messaging. These are all from the past couple months here in the region. So we're looking here at, let's look at the top left one here. AS Troop D, troopers attempting to locate 32-year-old female, long black hair, black jacket, blue jeans, last seen near Chena Point Avenue. See nixle.com for photo. What's a critique of this alert?
I never go and look at the photo.
I never do either.
Exactly. Yeah, no one ever goes and looks at the photo. And in this case, that link isn't even to the photo. It's to nixle.com, which is the provider of the service where you then have to type in the agency, right? So you got abbreviations, AS Troop D. People might not know, like AS Troop D, what's that mean, Alaska State Troopers, D detachment. There's no guidance. It doesn't say what to actually do. The hazard is unclear. Is this person dangerous? Are they just lost? I don't know.
Sometimes they'll say, do not approach. Other
Right.
times they don't. So
Yeah.
it's like,
And that's kind of what I'm getting at here, and I'm running low on time, so that's the only one I'm going to kind of go through here right now. But that's the thing, there's no consistency in it, and then you have things that are just like irrelevant, like there's a drone here, reply with a friend's phone number to forward. First of all, who even knows their friends' phone numbers, and why can't you forward it yourself, or why do you even care? So yeah, you want to be really, really clear about these things. Here's kind of a color-coded reference guide when you're looking at character counts. So here for WEA, here's your 90-character message, and then here's the awesome 360-character message, which will be rolling out really soon. These researchers found that if you're limited to that really short text, the best order to go in is your source, the guidance, what you should do, and then say the hazard location and time. That changes when you have more room to work with, where you can then say your source, your hazard first, put the guidance on the end, hazard location time, and then your big guidance paragraph. So an example here is a tsunami warning. I'm not going to go through all these, but essentially it's in that order, and this is how it would look. You could use on a 90 character your source, your action, and then what's going on. 360 character, you can make a lot more information. Down here, you can have more action words. People who do not evacuate could die. You're telling them really clearly the consequences of not acting, and this can really increase if they act. So now we're going to do an exercise, and I'm basically out of time, so we'll just kind of verbalize this, and also I don't have the printouts. But basically the exercise is you'd partner up, and I'd give you a sheet, basically a blank one of these, and we would have a hazard or an incident. You're going to identify the source. You're going to identify location, threat, protective actions, time, put them in the right order and with the right action words and clarity. and then we would evaluate and see how that goes. And then some discussion questions, which I'm now at 0 seconds. So I'm going to call it there. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
20 minutes and 12 seconds.